Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a PhD student at the University of Bristol, and I'm going to be talking about how smartwatches could help people with type 1 diabetes. Now, approximately 230,000 people in the UK have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and that's approximately equivalent to half the number of people living in Bristol today. It's likely that some of you here today will know someone living with diabetes, and I can tell you personally that it impacts almost everything you do in everyday life. But first, I'll give some context over what type 1 diabetes is. Well, type 1 diabetes is a chronic condition that means the body can no longer produce the hormone insulin. It's worth noting this is different from type 2 diabetes, which is also commonly spoken about, where the body doesn't produce enough insulin or can't use that insulin effectively. So by comparison, type 1, there's virtually no insulin production, so the systems for managing that need to be slightly more consistent. So think of insulin as the key that helps unlock the doors to the cells in the body. When you eat food, especially carbohydrate, your body will break that down into a sugar known as glucose. Now, glucose is the fuel for your cells, and it helps it fulfill the roles that help your body work in the way it does. But for people with type 1 diabetes, this process isn't happening, so that glucose can't get into the cells. Blood glucose levels are a really important thing to manage because of the health implications if they go outside that healthy range. Prolonged high blood glucose levels can result in eye, nerve, heart, and kidney problems. And periods of low blood sugars can result in dizziness or confusion, and in extreme cases, unconsciousness or seizures. If left untreated, this can be life-threatening. So for people with type 1 diabetes, they need to inject their own insulin in order to manage those blood glucose levels. But working out how much insulin to inject is quite a complex process. That's because there's so many things that affect blood glucose levels. What you eat, if you're doing activity, if you've drunk alcohol, how much sleep you've had, if you're stressed. Yeah, and that's just a few. There are many others on top of that. So whenever I'm doing anything, I need to be thinking about how is that affecting my blood glucose levels, and what do I need to do to keep it within that healthy range? And really, that's where the burden of type 1 diabetes lies, in managing those levels all the time, and that time and effort it takes. And this doesn't go away. But unfortunately, there is technology that helps make this management process a little easier. And this technology is getting a lot better in recent years. Whereas you used to have to check your blood glucose levels by pricking your finger and drawing blood and putting that on a sensor, there are now sensors that you can wear on the arm that continually check these and transmit the readings straight to your phone. On the insulin delivery side, there are insulin pumps that will continuously push that insulin in and update it as you need to, as opposed to having to manually inject it with a pen. They're also beginning to put these systems together in a closed-loop or hybrid closed-loop system, in which an algorithm, often utilizing artificial intelligence, will take information from the continuous glucose monitor and the insulin pump and build a picture of what your blood glucose levels are doing. It'll then automatically adjust your insulin dosage to try and keep you within that healthy range. This technology is really exciting, but it's far from perfect at the moment, and that's partly where my research comes in. What I'm looking at is, what if you added a smartwatch to that system? So suddenly it had an awareness of what activity you were doing and could factor that in. For example, if I was to go for a walk, that would tend to drop my blood glucose levels. If I was using this system, the smartwatch would detect that movement, and the system would gain an awareness of it and might try to reduce my insulin dose to try and counteract that drop. This would all be happening in the background without me necessarily having to do anything. And now, I'm not saying this will necessarily be the solution to everything or a cure for type 1 diabetes, but it might take away a few of those questions that you have to think about, or how regularly you have to think about them. But what did I do? So I recruited 24 participants from the UK with type 1 diabetes, and they got to choose a smartwatch to use for the study, or use a smartwatch they were already using before. Over 6 months, they then sent over that data to me from the smartwatch, but also their type 1 diabetes technology. And also each month they were involved in an interview or focus group in which we talked through how they were finding using the smartwatch and where they could see it being used in their type 1 diabetes management. And we'll start off by talking about that. So in life, there are lots of times when taking your phone out might be viewed as rude or attract unwanted attention, if you're in a meeting or a lecture, or maybe just out for a meal with a friend. But for many people now with type 1 diabetes, that's how they interact with their management. And so these actions can become misconstrued. But what if instead of having to get your phone out, you could simply twist your wrist and look at the information on your watch? Well, this is what some participants managed to set up, and they were able to see their blood glucose levels there, and they really loved the discretion and ease of access that provided. In fact, they wanted it to go further. They wanted more information available there and to use it as an interface to be able to input how many grams of carbohydrate they might be eating or a particular dose of insulin they wanted. On top of that, they also got data on the activity they were providing, and this allowed them to make more informed decisions about about that activity and how that might be impacting their blood glucose levels and adjustments they needed to make. But for these uses to really have an effect and reduce that burden, they need to be designed effectively. And so there are several design implications. The extra data was not always viewed as a good thing. Often participants became overloaded by the sheer quantity of it, or some of them became obsessed over the small details, and these led to them abandoning it or just avoiding that data. So what I'm saying is it needs to be automated, and that's in the system I showed you before, where it's being done in the background by a closed-loop system, not all the data being thrown at the participant or the user. It's also worth noting that all the participants chose different smartwatches or customized them in different ways, changing the watch face or buying wrist straps for different reasons, and each of them had their own set of reasons for doing that. So these devices need to be customizable to ensure that users actually want to wear them and continue to use them. Over time, these preferences also change and change in different circumstances, so they need to be flexible to make sure that they're always worn, or at least can be worn as much of the time as possible. It's worth noting that there are many other chronic conditions that also require consistent self-management. And there may be also similar places where such a smartwatch might be able to provide benefit. But what about all that data that was collected? Well, in the top graph you have there is the diabetes data, the blood glucose levels, the insulin dosage, and the carbohydrate they're receiving. Now, this is the information that a closed-loop system normally has, and we'll build a picture of it. But in the graph below, we've got some of the data from the smartwatch, in this case, the heart rate and the steps. And this gives it an idea of the activity that the participant was performing on this day in particular. So could this data actually be used to effectively work out what activity is being performed and how to adjust insulin levels accordingly? So that's part of it. There's a data set there that's been built, and this is going to be anonymized and released to allow other researchers to use and really increase the value of it. To improve and raise awareness of it, I'll be running a data competition that challenges people to predict future blood glucose levels based on that data you saw on the previous slide. It'll be running from mid-September to the end of November, and there'll be up to £1,600 in prize vouchers to be won across the different entries for different tasks. If you're interested in signing up, please follow the QR code there and leave your email address, and I'll get in contact when it's about to start. But thank you very much for listening. There are my contact details. I'm really happy to chat to people about this area, or if you have any questions at all.